but we were, I guess, in Oklahoma. Were we heading back, or we were heading to? We were heading to Michigan, weren't we?
No, it was Arkansas, and we were coming back from Texas A&M.
Oh, right, okay. All right, now I know. Okay, so we were coming back from Texas A&M. We actually had an evaluation scheduled for my palm that was having congestive heart failure, and we were hoping that there may have been a miracle surgery back then for him, that he wasn't able to survive until that, before we could schedule anything. But anyway, we were on the road, which we did a lot back then when we were younger. We were on the road, and for some reason, on our side, which was 2 lanes, the freeway, on our side, people started moving over to the left lane. We didn't see any construction signs or anything. And we just saw that people were moving over into the left lane. And so we did the same thing. We moved over into the left lane. And it was the most surreal experience you could imagine. Now, again, get the picture. You're in a 2-laner going in the same direction, and there's a whole lane that's empty. And there are no construction signs, no, like, please move over to the other lane. But everybody moved over to the other lane. And nobody was moving over into the right lane to take cuts. Nobody did that. How long would we get away with that here in California? I mean, in California, here's the rule as I discovered.
You don't even need a lane.
Yeah, in California, this is the rule. When you want to change lanes, this is the rule. When you want to change lanes, look for a big enough gap, right? Just a big enough gap. Turn your blinkers on for a half second and move. That's what you do. Because if you turn your blinkers on, what happens on the left side? They start speeding up, don't they? They won't let you in. It's like automatic. If you turn your blinkers on and you're patient, you'll never get in. So my rule is, I see a little gap. It's big enough for me to get in without causing an accident, of course. Blinker goes on, turn. I double check by looking back, make sure that is a gap, that's a real gap. Because I don't want to just like turn the blinker on, turn, and hit a car. So I do check.
Good plan.
But that's my plan, and it always works. The other alternative, if you don't have a gap, you know how things slow down, and there's no gap, right? The other alternative that I find that works is that you roll down the window and you go, "Hey," and they will, and let you in. It's just amazing. The two rules in California. You open your window, you go like, you point, and they will back away and let you in. So those are 2 rules.
Just to add to that, just 2 days ago, I was in California.
Uh-huh.
My mom was driving, I was on this side.
Uh-huh.
Very backed up traffic. Everybody was
Tight.
angry.
Tight.
That.
Tight.
And then we needed to turn right. And then there was
Oh,
this
and if
truck
you're way over on the left
with
side,
the trailer.
yeah.
And so we stopped at the light, and I looked up, and this guy looked so scary. And then I just kept doing this, like this. And he looked down, and he looked even scarier. And I said, right? And then I thought he was going to say no.
He
And then
smiled. Did he
looked-
smile?
Yeah, he said, he smiled, and he said,
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, and he just backed up.
Yeah, it's almost as if we're not, until we show human behaviors, we're just a car. And until we show human behaviors, we're competition to get home. So when you show human behaviors, people, and again, in Oklahoma, that whole lane. No, and did anyone go out during, it must have been 15, 20 minutes. Did anyone go out to take cuts in front? Nobody. went out and, I think eventually there was some I don't know.
Construction.
Yeah, but they knew about, we didn't know about, we just moved over because everybody moved over, nobody was in that lane. And nobody broke the trust. But here in California, different set of rules. The third rule I know is if you do want to get over, and rule 1 doesn't work, you know, you look, you got a gap, you look, you turn the blinker on, move, real quick. And if rule doesn't one doesn't work, and rule two doesn't work, you know, you wave your hand, which has never failed me. It's always worked. Rule number 3 is find a semi, because they tend to go slow, you know, and you can always get in front of a semi. But I've always, no matter what, I always do, you know, wave. I wave, you know, or I stick my hand out the window and wave. I just think it's a courtesy, you know.
Can I share one other thing related to that? There's this thing my mom does that she's taught me to do. When somebody does let you cut in, my mom always does this 3 blinker thing.
Yes, this is
Like
this is
3
a
or
thank
4
you,
times?
or you know,
And-
where I see
Yeah.
you, go ahead and go,
They get
and
it.
trucks respond, and
Because
they.
at
they get
first,
that.
even when they have to let you in, sometimes they get angry and they like start tailing you.
Mhm.
And then when my mom does the 3 times or 4 times, they
They don't
back
get mad.
up.
Yeah, because
It's
what,
amazing.
and that's the thing about waving. If people just let you in, you know, and they're just being nice, I just wave, you know, or if I think maybe it wasn't as big a gap as I would have liked it to have been, and I cut in there, I will put my hand out and I'll wave, because it's a wonder how that diffuses anger. You know, people won't be angry at you for doing that sort of thing. So we do have rules and etiquettes, but until you become human in somebody else's eyes, you're just seen as competition. And I think that has a lot of application to real life, doesn't it? We need to be human with the people we work with. We need to be human with our students. We need to be human with our clients, you know. One thing you probably will hear me say until I turn blue in the face, or whatever, is that you gotta earn the right to treat people. Until you do that, until you earn the right, you know, you can talk until you're blue in the face, but you're probably not gonna go anywhere with the client. So earning the right is very important. And God has earned the right to be with us, I hope. You know, and I hope we feel honored that He is part of our lives. So let's start with a word of prayer. Father, we want to thank you again for an opportunity to expand our knowledge base. We pray that we learn a lot from what we're reading, that there are layers there that we can continue to grow from as time goes on. Maybe we'll pick this book up, Family Crucible, a couple months from now and learn something else that we missed the first time around. There is a lot there, Lord. We thank you that you've given us tremendous insights into human nature. We pray that we just continue to grow in that path. In your Son's name. So we are just plugging along, and I hope you like the reading so far. It's not a textbook, right? And I used to do a textbook, and then I thought, I remember my days of learning. Did I ever like textbooks? Not really. So I thought, well, these are 2 really great books, and I think you'll learn just as much from reading these than you will from a textbook. It's telling you how to do something. You're seeing how you're doing something. You know, instead of just hearing about the process, you're seeing the process. So from that perspective, I think it's a win-win. So we ended on chapter 10. So we've got chapter 11. We got a few chapters, then I want to turn my attention to that thing I passed out to you last week. We'll look at that thing, and then I'll stick around for anybody who has questions on their little outline report type of thing. If you have questions about clinical impressions or anything like that, I can help you out with that. Who had chapter 11? Oh, Josh. Yeah. What did you think? It kind of
Start
this.
off with, hold on.
Go ahead.
I like to start off very clinical, then it got really steamy.
Yeah.
Got it.
Oh, yeah. It got kind of interesting there, didn't it?
But I
Didn't
did,
it?
what I liked about the beginning, like, is how he described, problems in couples and relationships,
Oh, yeah.
and how,
Seems to be the center of everything, doesn't it?
yeah. One thing I liked was like the couple, what he used, the couple simply didn't see the problems, though sometimes they have to work hard to avoid seeing them.
Yeah, and we do that in a myriad of ways. When there are marital tensions, sometimes we really work hard to ignore them. And how can we ignore them? Give me some examples, and then I'll get back to your thoughts on it. Help me out here, guys.
Put the focus on the child.
Put the focus, scapegoat the child, right? This is a pure example of that, not just one. As we found in this week's reading, it mutated over to somebody else. Sure.
Any kind of addiction.
Yeah, that's a way to mask not only internal pain, but relationship pain, right?
And like having maybe like a disorder like being depressed or having where one has to
Exactly,
lean on the other.
exactly. Sometimes getting sick is actually a salvation for a marriage, when you think about it. And sometimes our bodies unconsciously contribute to that, you know? Had a person in the military who we thought had a somatic condition. It seemed to be medical in orientation at first, and no, there was no medical etiology. And so the other explanation was it was psychiatric in origin, but it was a wonder how the abuse in the relationship diminished when it seemed that she had some sort of terminal condition. Very, very interesting. So yeah, sometimes some sort of condition, whether it's psychiatric or medical in nature, can actually be a source of pulling people together. It's like you're pulling together to fight this common enemy. In a sense, the parents are pulling together so that they can work with a troubled child. Well, what they didn't know is that they almost created the troubled child so they could distract themselves from their own marital issues. So we are good at distractions. And we can do distractions. Whether it's work, other family members, right? For him it's work. For her it's who? Her mom, right? So they're distracting with those two forces in addition to their kids and not dealing with the marriage.
I think sadly too in the church, a lot of people use
Oh.
the religious activity.
This is another thing. Sometimes it is so true that sometimes our religion, our faith system, gets in the way with us being in real relationships with people. Has it ever happened to you guys? I've been around some people, they're constantly, are you saved? Are you saved? Are you saved? I don't even have a relationship with them, and yet they're asking me such questions, Please, have a relationship with me first. Even if you want to go down that road, please just at least have a relationship with me first. Let me know that you value me,
Well, they are asking you the most intimate question
Yeah,
of
but-
your being.
Yeah,
I mean,
but it's
wow.
like they skipped over everything else. It's like, who am I? What am I? What am I all about? Do you even know my name? Let alone are you asking if I'm saved? Yeah. Again, they may be very, very genuine in that process, but it has created a barrier from my perspective, more of a barrier than a genuine feel of caring for me. Even though they might, in their minds, genuinely feel that they care for me, I don't feel it. Yeah. Josh, you were going to continue on the chapter.
Another thing I thought is the fear of why they don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
They listed a bunch of interesting.
Fear. And we've talked about that before. Sometimes, remember how we talked about anger? Anger is a secondary emotion, and underneath that is fear. Generally, we are driven a lot by fear. And when you see marital tensions, generally, almost always, the underlying foundation to what's going on in that relationship is fear. Fear of losing that person, fear of not having your needs met or ever will be met from this point on. You know, fear that the rules will change. And I won't be on the same sheet of music with you, type of thing. So yeah, fear is a big thing. Anything else that you took out of that chapter?
There was a couple other
It,
stuff.
you know, it's amazing, even a short chapter can have a lot of stuff in it.
The idea of one partner is a SIMPA, the other one specializes. It just kind of shows how one takes one role, one's like in reality, the
Yeah.
other one
Yeah.
focuses in.
One is kind of functioning at what might be perceived as a higher level functioning, the other one then becomes the problem. And they also made a point that it's not just kids who are scapegoated, sometimes the spouses are scapegoated.
Yeah, connecting into what Josh just said, and then about the whole church idea, we had one family where, the parents were, they're in jeopardy of losing their house, and dad had lost his job, so, instead of dad being that provider and going back out to get a job, he just turned to the church, and he put all his time, all his energy in the church, and they were like getting ready to lose their house, and she had to go out and get a job after not working and being a stay-at-home mom
Yeah,
for
can
all
you
these
imagine
years.
the anger,
And
but the fear
There's
underneath
still
it?
so much resentment there, and this happened years ago, and
Yeah.
he's still involved in the church, and she's still working her butt off. She's working,
Yeah.
50, 60 hours a week trying
And,
to save his house.
and that's gotta create a lot of walls between people,
Yeah,
we,
it's been very challenging.
instead of tearing down the walls, we're so much more advanced at putting up walls
And
than
these
we are
3
tearing
kids
down.
already have issues, and now the kids are divided. Well, I'm a Christian, so I'm on dad's side, and the other ones are, well, mom's trying to provide for us and save our home and our
Yeah,
livelihood.
yeah,
So it's created a whole
yeah,
bunch of
yeah. And in
There's-
all of this, no one's listening to the other person.
There's actually a class, it's called Toxic Faith, by Atterburn and Hilton. That's classic, talks about
And I
Toxic.
like that title, because sometimes faith can be very toxic, especially when it doesn't have the ring of genuineness to you, or you
Right.
don't feel like there's a relationship there. And that's why I always say, again, you have to earn the right to treat a client. If you haven't established a therapeutic relationship with that client, you haven't earned the right to treat that client yet. So there's a lot of preparatory stuff going on, building a relationship, building rapport, building trust, building credibility before then you can treat a client. So this thing about, if you're ever gonna have an affair, don't tell me about it. Did you remember that? Wasn't it interesting? Okay, so, and then it's almost as if, now the seed is planted, and the ultimate outcome of that is he goes out and he does have an affair. And then she suspects, and then she asks him. And then, what do you see? Their relationship heats up. Because they took it to the edge of a cliff, and they stopped, and now the relationship is heating back up, because now the fear is driving them to do something, right? And yet, he's not willing to let go of his lover, and so now more tension starts to build up, and then it waxes and it wanes, it just goes up, it goes down, it goes all around. And what was pointed out by the authors is that he grew up in a family situation where apparently his parents didn't have a good marriage. Is that any surprise? And is it any surprise that she grew up in a family situation where her parents didn't have a good relationship? Is that a surprise? No. Yeah.
I have one thing that I thought was really interesting. I don't think they necessarily said it in this chapter, about how we attract like our psychological twin or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes people will say we either attract opposites or people carbon copies of who we are, type
Of
of
like
thing.
the past.
Yeah. What's familiar to us. A lot of it does have to deal with familiarity. What are we used to? What's our comfort zone? It takes a lot of work to break out of what you're familiar with, what's your comfort zone, because it's, again, we don't have a role in what buttons are placed in us by our parents. But we can have a choice later on in life not to let those buttons be pushed. You know, we can learn how to not respond the way that we have in the past. We can grow. We can unlearn some things. It takes a lot of conscious effort, but it is very, very possible. So John grew up in a family situation where her mother was constantly angry at his father. She would turn to him, to unload and to be, he was her support system. So he was being smothered, as the authors put it. I want you to hear that, the word smothered. Now, she grew up in a family, again, where the parents were unhappy, and she was very dependent upon her mother, very dependent. And she was always afraid that her mother would leave her. Do you get it? Do you see it? Okay, you got he being smothered and she being clingy. Okay, can you figure out where a problem might occur in this scenario? Right? What happens? Clingy? What happens here then?
He feels
Push away, right? Push away. More clingy, more push away, more clingy, more push. Well, is it any wonder that they were having problems in the relationship? Yeah. So dealing with these individual issues would be pivotal to the treatment process, right? Can I feel whole without a person? Which is kind of where we're going with this family crucible thing. Can I be whole? By being intimate with another human being, allowing that intimacy to take place. Can I be okay with it? Can I resist the urge to push people away? So it's very interesting. But in essence, they were both pushing each other away, right? So we just spread the blame equally. Or not blame at all and just say everybody's doing the same thing. And until they figure this part out, until there's insight, there's conscious awareness of what they're doing, they can't deal with it until it's brought to the conscious awareness part. Right? Neat chapter, I think. They brought in a different pace, but it still illustrates that. Again, they're doing the same thing. And it's all driven by fear. Right? Fear, I don't want to be smothered. Fear, I don't want somebody to leave me. It's all driven by fear. If you're working with couples, just try to figure out what are they fearful of losing. And constantly try to reassure them that when you find it in each person, that they're both experiencing the same thing, probably in different ways. So there's no blame. Right? Look for the fear. So we got chapter 12. Oh, this is interesting. Who had chapter 12? That, what did you think?
Mostly I thought it was ridiculous.
2 months have gone by, right?
Mostly I thought it was ridiculous. But so time has gone by and they took a break.
Mm-hmm.
And the break, obviously, you read in a previous chapter, was a decision that the therapist let the family make. Hey, you guys
let's take a
decide
1 week
when you're
hiatus.
ready
It
to
ended
take
up being
some.
2 months.
Yeah, and then they
Good.
come in because of a call from the dad, who is semi-panicked but not really, but mostly. I think it's because he subconsciously knows it's his fault. No, but seriously, so we're not supposed to do that. And so they come in and, they start talking about an issue that came up at home, and it was this big fight, and it's about, Dawn.
And it's not Claudia, it's
No,
Dawn.
it's not, but it's funny because they make a joke about it earlier in the other chapters of, okay, watch out, because you might be scapegoated next.
Right?
And
And sure enough, didn't it happen?
it's just foretelling the future, and they did well, and that's exactly what the family does. But I think it's interesting because this happens often, I think, with patients in therapy, And they had motions of this at the beginning of their sessions.
Yeah, yeah,
Where they
yeah.
thought, oh, well, great, well, that's done,
I figured
and
it
we're
out.
good to go.
I take a few steps
Mhm.
forward, but what they don't realize and what therapists try to warn them, which you pointed out, is that you will regress. You
Yeah.
know, scapegoating, but more than that, you will regress in other ways. And then you just have to keep going.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know if I think it's regression. I know that it's often identified as that, but I think it's, I mean, you're muscling through some stuff that you've never been through.
Been through
I mean, if you're an addict and you've been through, you know,
You've been down
maybe
this
you've been
road
through
before.
therapy before and you've been through an intervention and, okay, and then, you know, 10 years later, or even 5 years later, or 5 months, or a week later, you know, you drink again, that's regression, but they've never been through this before, it's all so new.
Yeah, but they did
So-
take some forward steps into
They did,
unknown
yeah.
territory.
Yeah.
And then they moved back to now scapegoating,
Yeah.
which is an
So,
old.
yeah, technically,
old,
yeah, it's
you know,
regression, yeah.
concept. So,
So-
but yeah, but there are other words that can describe it
Yeah.
just as perfectly as, you know, we use lots of different words. You know, before I think I shared with you guys, bringing the unconscious to conscious awareness with Freud. Well, what about Rogers? He said insight. Well, aren't they the same thing? Yeah, they're the same thing. You know, it's just a different word.
Yeah.
So, you know, nothing new under the sun from my perspective. But yeah, but, you know, here we had, you know, 2 months of probably pretty decent functioning. And then all of a sudden, it you know, Don becomes the target.
Yeah.
And do you remember the issue that set it all up?
It really, and I think that's why I was saying, I just think it's so silly.
Yeah, it
because
was kind of one
I
of
think
these silly.
to anybody outside who's not dealing with some of the problems and tensions that the couple has, then it seems like nothing, but Don is asking to borrow Claudia's bike, and he's up out of bed at a time when he
Bike.
shouldn't be out of bed,
You never
and
know.
he's yelling
You never know.
downstairs, and then it's a conversation between, you know, Don and his dad, and all of a sudden the mother's in the other room, and she's like, oh no, like somebody has defied my rule. And so she gets really upset about it, and that's it, that's all it blew up.
Yeah.
And can I
It was a
write this?
fight.
No, you can't, you need to go to bed or you're gonna be punished, and it's just something that is, I mean, it's completely just blown out of proportion.
Blown out of way out of
Do you
proportion.
think that's just like, kind of like, sometimes these little things cause, or basically, it's a little release of something that's actually
Yeah.
going on underneath?
Underneath, things
Yeah.
build up. And the authors made a point that, you know, some of what was happening with Claudia and Dawn was that the parents were fighting through them.
Hmm.
Sometimes people take punches at people through other people, you know? And so that happened with Claudia. And interestingly enough, it's like Claudia and Laura sitting, I think it was in this chapter, they're sitting together. They're sitting removed from the situation. They're actually physically sitting in a way that really represents what's going on in the family at the time. They're removed from the whole issue. Don now is the central point. And actually, when the therapists bring it up, you know, that sometimes it does mutate to somebody else, Claudia kind of extends to her brother some sympathy. She said, I don't think you should take on this role, buddy. It's not a good place to be. It's not a good place to be. You know, not that she wants it back. I can't imagine that she would want it back, but she's getting it too. And so, but you know, Don wanted to borrow Claudia's bike. Dad said yes. Mom said no. Then Dad said, Don, you decide. And Carl's like exacerbated. He says, do you know what you guys did to him? Do you know what kind of dilemma you put him into by doing that? And they had no clue at first as to, you know, because he was actually deteriorating in front of their eyes as he was explaining the story. He was starting to stumble around, and Carl was trying to get him to see. Do you notice when he started to disintegrate or started to fall apart, and they were starting to pick up on it? But he had to be as blunt to say, well, Dad, you said yes. Mom, you said no. Then Dad, you said Don, you make the decision. What kind of place is that to put a young man? You know, Any wonder he didn't, he crumbled. It's any wonder. I mean, that's fairly normal when you're put into a double bind. What else can you do? Escape? Or crumble, deteriorate right in front of people's eyes. So yeah. I gotta read it to you because it just, it emphasizes how we shouldn't be afraid to call it the way we see it. Part of therapy is not just listening and magnifying. That's what I call Rogerian therapy, listening and magnifying. It's non-directive. You're not telling people what to do. You're listening and magnifying so they can hear what they want to do. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Listen and magnify. But, at times you have to put the mirror in front of people. That's more Gestalt. This is what I see. So let me see if I have it straight, Carl said. Easing his voice at the note in Carolyn's voice and turning slightly to include David in his inquiry. He spoke to David. You took the decision, page 166. You took the decision at first and told him that he could write the note to Claudia. That's correct, David said. Carl looked at Carolyn. Then you countermanded David's decision and told Don that he couldn't do it, that he had to go to bed. Yes. Carl turned again to David. And then you told Don that he could choose which one of you he was going to obey. You didn't even try to talk this out with Carolyn. You got that? No, David admitted apologetically. Carl was barely managing to contain his exasperation with the parents. Do you have any idea how the two of you worked out a system like this where you're free to countermand each other? Because I assume it must happen on both sides. This time it seemed to be structured so that you made a decision, David, and then Carolyn overruled the decision. But the scary thing is that she did it without talking to you at all. She acted as though you didn't exist. She just told Don to do it her way. You could say the same thing about David, too. He didn't ask, ahead of time either, right? Now Carl looked at David more pointedly. You must do the same thing to her at times. And in fact, you did it in this situation. Do you see him calling them on it? Mm-hmm. He's in their face now, pointing this out. You didn't fight with her to get the decision back, and you didn't give in to her decision either. You turned the decision over to Don. You gave him the balance of power, as though he had to decide which one of you to obey. Carl was trying hard to keep the blame equalized. You got to do this, guys. If you're working with a couple, you better spread it out evenly as you can. Because once somebody perceives that you're blaming one more than the other, they're going to disengage from the treatment process. So you try to keep the blame equalized between David and Carolyn and making an effort not to offend them too much. By turning the decision over to Don, you ignored Carolyn in the same way that she ignored you. Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. So they fought through each other. They didn't get on the same sheet of music. They put Don in a situation he couldn't extract himself from. And it's any wonder, like I said, he broke down. Okay. So now Carolyn's a little depressed. She's thinking, oh, well, we didn't change, didn't we then? And it's interesting he came back with saying, well, it's not that you haven't changed. You have done some stuff in here. You've actually come a long way, if I can paraphrase him. But you haven't started to work on the marriage quite yet. You get it? Because really, all the scapegoating is to avoid working on the marriage. Although they stopped scapegoating to a certain extent until they turned on Don, they still didn't work on the marriage. Okay. So that's interesting. Pretty good chapter. Chapter 13. We had somebody who
That was me.
Go Carrie.
Well,
Go Carrie.
I've been reading this book and putting it down and feeding the dog and a little bit here and there. And this was a chapter that I couldn't put down because it was so
Oh,
exciting.
it got interesting.
This is
didn't
the
it?
heat. This is the pinning of Dawn
Yeah, it's Don.
by Carl.
Sarcastic Don.
Yeah.
Took a nasty turn, didn't he?
Yeah, it did. it got aggressive for the second time, the violence, you know, we heard the slap of Claudia, and now we have the pinning of Dawn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that whole, in the counseling session, working out, you know, Dawn being pinned by Carl, that having to happen because.
It was a test of wills, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Don was needing to figure out his place. He was wanting to be treated like the adults and to
Adults.
be an equal.
He had a sense of superiority. Did you catch that? You know, and Carl asked him, I wonder what it must be like to be hated. He was trying to get him to think about when you're superior, when you have that sense of being superior to other people, and you express that, hello, are people gonna like you? You know people like that, right? You know people who think they're better than you. Do you like them? Yeah, so anyway, so yeah, Don wanted to be the adult, and he thought he deserved to be up there.
Right. And that struggle that happened in there is the struggle that he's having at home with his parents, at times treating him like an adult.
Yeah.
And at times
Turning to him for
treating him like
support.
a child.
Yeah, they put him in a position of authority, then they take that foundation out from underneath him. He doesn't know if he's coming or going.
Right.
So he's angry or fearful of being in that situation again.
Right.
It was interesting to see Claudia interject to her brother, but you have to accept your role.
Yeah,
Especially 'cause when she was the
we
one that
are
came in.
children. She's like she's defending her parents.
Kids want boundaries.
They do.
And their parents were not setting those boundaries
not.
with them.
Absolutely.
Treating them as equals and putting them in awkward positions where they felt that superiority
Fight
or
and-
that they could demean their parents and
Yeah.
the things in this chapter that Don had said to his dad about something, sawing the wood the wrong way or something stupid like that.
They put him in so many contradictory positions, fighting through them at times, putting them at the same level as themselves at other times, trying to put them in child, not teenage roles at other times. I mean, you know, when you've got all those things happening to you, you don't know who you are from day to day. I mean, you got to start feeling crazy, somewhat
Yeah.
crazy, you know.
Well, and I liked what Carl straight out said to Don, in that I'm not gonna let you bulldoze me, basically like you have your parents. I'm gonna set some boundaries with you.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's basically showing them they need to do the same things.
Yeah, and that was the result of Don taking the swing at him, right, knocking his glasses off, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there was some physical aggression that took place in that session, which you wouldn't have expected from Don of all people, but lo and behold, here it happens with Don. And so Carl does what? He sits on
On
him.
him. He holds him down repeatedly.
Sits on him, all right.
Right.
All right, now, folks, we wouldn't do that today. All right, we would not do that today. Okay. But it was the right move for that family back then. You know, he sat on him, and Don eventually got tired. You know, and you know, he's saying, "I'm angry at you. I'm angry at you." And Carl didn't buy that. You know.
What would you recommend to do today?
What
What would you recommend, or what would he do today?
You might use some gestalt. You might, you know, you would definitely not hit back, you know, because you know in fact, my sister will probably come to the next class period, but she's in the medical field, physical therapist. She knew of a physical therapist who's working with a client who's hitting her, elderly man who probably had dementia or whatever. Anyway, so what she did is she pinned, the therapist pinned the guy against the wall so he couldn't hit her anymore. And now there's the possibility of a lawsuit, that sort of thing. You know, it's sort of like, okay, now there are takedowns in other settings. You have protocol. She should have called for help and takedown type of thing, so it could have been, you know, not just one person's you know, this is what happened, and the other person, this is what happened. She should have called for help. But you would definitely try to get out of the way. I wouldn't like just let my face get hit. You know, I think I can take a punch, but I don't want to do that. I just don't want to go there.
For us, what we do, because most of our families are really severe, like the kids and the parents, and we're all trained to restrain, but we don't restrain in that setting because it ruins the trust between the families. And
If you can help not to do it, you don't want to go there.
We don't, and because a lot of our families are bipolar, and so are the kids, so if you restrain, it just kind of ruins that trust. So deflect is the first thing we do, and then we call the police.
And the police are there to do whatever they need to do, right? So, but, yeah, you're right. Trust sometimes is something that is very fragile and you don't want to damage it. One of the things that you do with your clients, one of the first things you do is informed consent. You know, because if they share with you that they've abused their child, you know you're going to have to report that, right? So, you know, if you don't tell them ahead of time, that's a potential, you know, the abuse of a child or abuse of a parent, you know, the elderly who's helpless in terms of being able to protect themselves, and then you report it, that trust is broken. But if they know that that's something on the table, you know, that's different, you know. In some settings, they know that's on the table. Restraint is on the table, you know. But in some settings, there's a choice where, hey, we're not even going to put that on the table. We're going to deflect, and we're going to call the police. But yeah, trust and credibility, so very important. And he got Don's trust or respect at the very least, didn't he? By sitting, Don was trying to get out. And I don't know how long they were at it. They were at it for a little while because Don was persistent. But every move that Don made, Carl counter-moved. And he must have been a weighty guy, is all I can say, you know, because, you know, he kept him on the ground. You know, because he didn't have age going in his favor. So anyway, okay, so yeah. And he keeps trying to reassure, because Laura's kind of worried about this, wasn't she? She's, you know, let go of him. Oh, he's okay, honey. He just got scared. He panicked. Wasn't it a nice refrain? Instead of he got angry, which is what Don said, I'm angry at you. You know, he panicked.
Well, there were light bulbs with Don realizing his power was not the level that he thought it was. At least
Hello?
in the counseling
That's
realm.
right. He's not as strong as he
Yeah.
thinks he is. And he's not an adult, no matter how many times he says that. He's not an adult.
And then he goes home and wrestles with his dad multiple
Oh,
times
yeah.
and has a light bulb that, oh my dad is
my dad is actually strong.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Right.
I thought I was superior in that domain. Oh, and by the way, Freud thought he was superior to his dad by the age of 2. Some of you were in that class, right? All right, so this is a wake-up call for Don. And Claudia already has a message, as was so aptly put out, you know, hey, you should accept your role. You are the kid. And they are our parents. And so that was good stuff.
Well, I was surprised because I know in the world we live in today, parents would not have responded to the therapist the way that these parents did back then.
Yeah.
By actually
David
thanking
started
him.
crying.
Right. And thanking him
Tears.
for caring enough
Yeah.
about their family to actually do that
Yeah.
to Don.
Yeah.
And to show them.
You wouldn't see that today.
Right.
There'd be litigation city. You know, and what gets me crazy is when kids are acting out, and yes, maybe there's a little over the edge behavior with an adult type of thing, that the parents rush in and defend the kid. What they're being taught is that it's okay to be acting out, and then you take it out on the system. That's what they're being modeled. It's sort of like when remember I shared that illustration where my mom would get these phone calls. I'd pick up the phone, I'd hear who it is, and I'd say, oh, it's so and so, and you want to talk to my mom? And my mom would say, don't tell them I'm here. All right, so she's modeling lying. All right, they're modeling, you know, not so appropriate behavior. The parents are modeling not so appropriate behavior when they run to the defense of the kid who's been acting out. not to say that the other person's behavior is defensible, but neither is the kid's behavior defensible. There should be some parity there. Yeah. So anyway, so we've got David crying, right? And then Don in the next week does ask his dad to wrestle with him, and it is insightful to him that his dad is stronger than him. Wow, what a lesson.
For me, what was really touching was on page 174, pretty much right in the middle, where I guess this is Gus talking to David. Well, when David says there was so much distance between his dad and then Gus says that, but Don can't feel closer to the older generation if you're not in it. And then I was wondering why it touched me so much, and then I started to think, well, maybe I'm wrong, but my guess was maybe David never got to be a boy because there was such a distance. And
Well,
then
if there's no
he's-
physical intimacy, no slap on the back, you're doing a great job, here's handshake, give a handshake to your son when he graduates from high school, whatever. And him to break down in tears is indicative of just emotional absence, on the part of his father. His father wasn't there for him emotionally and or physically. And really, you can equate the two to a certain extent, can't you? One kind of feeds the other. So, yeah, very, very interesting. It does open up another door, though, of what needs to be worked on in the family system. Now they need to work a little more on balance, right? But above and beyond everything else, they need to work on the marriage. All right, that's what they need to work on. So we get to chapter 14. Yeah, I think he had that.
Yeah, because following along right after the whole
Yeah.
altercation. Yeah, I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to
It's pretty
think.
intense. It's like, woo!
And because the author is sitting there kind of like, yeah. And then talking the whole, so I guess maybe I should start at the very beginning. What I thought was really cool at the very beginning is when the family's like, well, what can we do?
Yeah, what can we do?
And it's actually what made me think of is a lot of my members today. A lot of what a lot of people are like, especially with their faith. Well, come on, just give me a formula. Tell me what to do. Just
Right,
tell me. Just
right.
give me a list of steps,
Uh-huh.
and I'll do it.
Yeah.
But spirituality, and I'm seeing more and more therapy. It's not like that.
Yeah,
It's a process. It's how you feel. It's how you are.
that's exactly what he came back with. It's not so much of what do you do, it's how do you feel.
And I loved how he said, look, I can't give you what you want. I'm not here to give you answers. I'm not here to give you, I'm here to help you along the way. But until then it started to deteriorate because, especially with the whole thing with Don, and then him talking about the whole inserting himself into the family and losing almost the detachment, almost professional, Carl losing that professional objectivity.
Yeah.
When he actually was talking about, I was his parent and I dealt with him and
He established boundaries.
yeah.
At best, you can say I modeled the establishment of some boundaries that
Right.
might be more effective. But again, in this day and age, we would not sit on it.
Well, but I'm just saying what's problematic and a good portion of this chapter is
Yeah.
this discussion.
Yeah.
I like how he brought it back to the whole decode therapy where there's two of them, and like he was saying, well, I was that kind of that tether and that anchor
Yeah.
that kept him from losing himself completely into
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
and helped bring him back out.
Because he was fragmented. Don was fragmented. I mean,
Yeah.
literally right before their eyes.
And so he was able to kind of pull everything together.
Mhm.
But that whole, and I wasn't quite sure if the author is saying, yeah, sometimes it's good to actually, because it's almost like it's almost more powerful when you're able to insert. But then I was like, this seems a little problematic to me because you're trying to help them with their issues, and I know just from
Which-
mine.
Yeah, and you go back to an earlier chapter where it said, that their job is not to be directive. It becomes then the job of the clients to be directive with
Right.
the therapeutic process, and now they're stepping in. You find that it's not unlike the dance that the family is going through. There's a dance that's occurring between the therapist in the
Because
family.
it seems like Carl,
So
like,
sometimes you step forward and you do a little more than what you would like to do, and then you kind of step back and you.
because he like scolded the parents at
Yeah.
one point. You see
Oh,
that?
yeah.
And that's what
Sometimes in your
that's what
face,
seemed.
right in your face.
And that's what it seemed to get Dawn to
Yeah.
like all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Because what I think happened is that Carl's like, pretty much like, you guys are horrible parents.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just pretty much letting him have it. And
Yeah,
then,
he let it go with both, barrels of the shotgun.
and then Dawn, I think what Dawn got so upset about was, I can fight my own battles. I don't need you
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
fight my battles
Yeah,
for me.
strike at it.
And then I'll show you that I'm
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So there were two lessons going on in that one session, Not only was he trying to help the parents see what position they were putting Dawn in.
Right.
Bring it to conscious awareness. What kind of a non-winnable situation they were putting Don in. But they were also trying to communicate to Don himself what kind of non-winnable position he was placing himself in too.
He was deluding himself.
Yeah, he's deluding himself by trying to be an adult here when he doesn't belong in that category. Even though he's been placed, he kind of comes by a little honestly, and he's been placed in that position for a while, every so often. But he needs to lose that kind of smugness, and I'm better than everybody else, because it costs. And he said, people hate people like that. Didn't he? He was right in his face with that one. People hate people who think they're better than other people.
And so I was with Carl to a certain point, because there's certain times where there's certain people you're dealing with where it gets to the point where they just want you to tell them what they want to
Yeah.
hear, and then
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
done with this.
Yeah.
You really want to know what I think,
Yeah.
and then you lay it all out there. And a
Yeah.
lot of times they really don't like it when you do that. But then you're like how we started talking about the scalpel.
Yeah.
Like when you get through the denial and you
Yeah.
get through the lies and you just shock them out of it, because it's like, you know what? It's like, you know what? This is your fault.
Yeah.
And then they're like, whoa, whoa,
I
like,
didn't want to hear that part.
right. And then so I was with them there. It was just that
There's a little twist there.
losing the boundary. It just for me, it just seems like the boundary needs to stay.
Yeah. But the neat thing is that they're being, what I think is a strength in this book anyway, is that they're being vulnerable with, at times they'll say, hey, shouldn't have gone there, shouldn't have done that, shouldn't have said that. There was countertransferences going on, da-da-da-da. They lay it all out on the line.
Yeah, he mentioned this chapter with the one woman he was dealing with. He had the one woman in the hospital because she had tried to commit
Yeah,
suicide.
he exploded.
And the other one was
That's
just
the one
whining,
who had
yeah.
what he perceived to be inconsequential problems, because the other person had, problems to such an extent that suicide was the only option that she had in her mind. So, they make mistakes. And you know what? We're gonna make mistakes. If we can own them and learn and grow from them, hey, we're doing good. Because we will make mistakes, but we can grow from those mistakes, and that would be a good thing. Another thing, I should go back to the previous chapter and mention, we don't sit on clients. We also don't sit on clients and give them massages. We don't do that. That would not be a right thing to do.
What was this book written, by the way?
It's 1960. So it makes sense back then, but that's something we wouldn't do. And it made sense at the time. He's trying to help Don relax. Okay. But in this day and age, we cannot go there.
There's no, Dora, is there a level of touch that you can reach with a client?
Here's the thing that, the safest touch is on the shoulder. Can I use Zori as an example?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so that's a safe thing. Sometimes maybe like here, I've done that with a few clients, just cried with them,
No touching.
but when you start to do other forms of physical contacts, that can be misconstrued.
Yeah.
So you gotta be careful. You've got to know your client inside and out, and know, will this person respond to that in this moment? I had a client once, 18-year-old, basic trainee, got to the military, went through some of the training, was getting suicidal. there was no way for her to, despite offers of therapy to help her cope with the military service, there was no way to get her to look at staying in the military. She was just gonna be suicidal until she heard the magic words, well, I'm gonna administratively discharge you from the service. And then she started getting better, right? Well, then we started talking about some real issues. And one of the issues was the coldness she perceived between herself and her mom. And there was, this overwhelming sense of distance and anger. Well, always underneath that is fear, right? So this anger at her mom, and almost to the point where, if her mom wasn't alive, she wouldn't care, that type of thing. And as we're talking and the therapeutic relationship is building and building and building and building, and I have a sense that she hasn't had some real good relationships in life, something in the course of the conversation, I just kind of can, is it okay if she had her hand, can you put your hand like there, and I just kind of went like that. All right? And it was like the last session we had together, and she's crying and all that stuff, and just like that, And then, we get out into the lobby, and you shake the person's hand as you say goodbye, because I know she's leaving the service and that sort of thing. And she had the need to hold on to that hand for just a second longer than what you would normally do, And 2 months later, I get a call from New York, and she's on the other line. And she said, just wanted to let you know I'm doing great. I only had 2 or 3 sessions. That's it. 2 or 3. We didn't do that much, except establish a relationship that was so significant to her. She picked up the phone and called me from New York, and I'm in Missouri type of thing, So, you have moments like, but you have to know, is this person going to be responsive to hand on the shoulder or something like that? Is this a person who can take a joke? Some people can't take jokes. The humor is not going to be part of your therapeutic alliance with them, because they will not respond appropriately, or it won't resonate with them. Let's put a better spin on it. It just won't resonate with them. All right? So you've got to know your client, earn the right, and figure out what can I say in a way that they can hear it. And a joke may not be one of those ways. I love to joke, by the way, but yeah.
No, I was gonna comment that it's good to know too, like where you guys are going into, like where we're going into, because like for me in wraparound, it's totally different. Like the boundaries are different, the rules are different. I mean, we'll have our behavioral
Different
coaches,
game.
the kids will jump on them. Like it's different. We'll give our parents hugs, we may pray with them, things like that. So, for me coming now into this role, which is very different than wrap, it's understanding, dual relationships, because wraparound dual
conflicts of
relationships,
interest,
that's the whole program.
dual relationship,
Like
yeah.
you take your kids out to lunch,
Right.
you take your parents out to lunch, you have
Right.
that type of intimacy. And so
Right.
it's very, very different, and that's
Right.
why it's been helpful to hear that, because for us that's not a big deal.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
it's very
Depending on the climate, depending on the
Yep.
culture, you're gonna have different rules, different standards, different protocols. But in general, in most counseling agencies, unless it's a special one where they've got different protocols and so forth, you've got to be very cautious about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate.
Especially dealing with members of the opposite sex.
Oh, yeah,
That
yeah,
really
yeah.
complicates. I mean, I can give Josh or Adam a shoulder bump or,
Mhm.
whatever,
Yeah,
but
I feel like
if I
sexual
reach over and
assault,
touch
yeah.
Lexi's arm, that's a whole
Could be a whole different story.
dynamic.
Some people, sometimes maybe a person comes in with anxiety-related complaints, and maybe you want to dim the lights a little bit so to help them relax. Well, for some people, that actually may not be a relaxing thing. What if they have a history of being sexually abused? Dimming the lights is, now we're creating something that might, be perceived, we're trying to hide something that's going to occur, So sometimes, I've never had it happen, but if I were to have it happen with a client where they would say, I would like the door left open, please, I would be okay with that. I would also have to say this, though. You understand, though, with that door open, I cannot maintain confidentiality with you. You do understand that. And I would feel better if they would sign and acknowledge that to be the case. And if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. Not an issue with me at all, right? If they want to sit next to the door, not an issue at all. You know, let them feel comfortable. Give them choices in this situation, because until they feel safe, they're not going to put stuff on the table that they need to put on the table, right? So, yeah, yeah. The massage. You never heard that in here. You read it in the book, but I did not say massage a client. I never said that. Okay. All right.
Got on tape, Karen.
That's right. You say you cannot sue me on that one. Okay. All right. Chapter 15. Who did the last one that we're doing today? Nobody? Oh, maybe you're not here. Okay. Well, basically, the chapter talked about sometimes you hit a point where there's kind of lukewarmness, is what they called it, in the marriage. Yeah, it becomes lukewarm, and then there's increased discomfort in the marriage, and then people start acting out, you know, to distract themselves from the pain that is being experienced by the fears that are growing in people. What was interesting is that we have this scenario of Carolyn. You know how she said that her typical thing is she would badger David, you know, for advice on how to do something, because this thing about painting the room was going to be something important, right? And her typical MO is she badgers him for advice. Eventually she gets advice. It's all traumatic and all that sort of stuff. And then it gets done, you know. And she thought, well, I'm going to take ownership of this. You know, I'm going to take ownership of this. I'm going to paint the room, pick the color, paint the room. She did all the work herself. He comes home, he says it's nice. And she is livid. Now, why is she livid? He says it's nice, but she's livid.
Nice, that's it.
Well, how you say it makes a difference, right? Yeah, you can say it's nice, and the person can really think you've given them the greatest compliment on the face of the planet, depending on the delivery, you know. But she did not get that interpretation, you know. And it's interesting. I gotta read this to you. Let's see if I find the page here. Page 193. Let's see if we can. If that's the right page. Okay. Not 193. David looked embarrassed and defensive, but I thought I did appreciate what you did. I was a little surprised and maybe a little puzzled that we hadn't talked about it before you did it, but I liked it. I really did. All right? Carolyn edged toward bitterness. It isn't that, David. It's the lack of feeling in you. We have this fight about so many different subjects, but it's always the same fight. When you come home from work and we both had a difficult day, I really listen to your complaints and troubles. I take them seriously. But if I'm having a frustrating day, it felt lonely, worn myself out doing drudgery, had a fight with the kids, it's as though you only mumble a few words and brush it off. You never really listen to me. Her voice underlined those words. You never really listen to me. Then her words trailed off in discouragement. It's as though you don't find me important. Ooh, 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 ha, ha, ooh. Try to cool down from that one. And he's not cooling down, is he? He's going, Carolyn, I think you're wrong, David replied firmly. I think you magnify my failure to be a good listener and make too much of the whole issue. You're doing it now, Carolyn. Claire. You're brushing off the issue I'm trying to raise right now. As David felt increasingly frustrated, his defensive stance began to erode. Okay. His voice tightened perceptibly. His face narrowed in anger. I'm not brushing it off, Carolyn. I just see it differently. All right? All right? And they are seeing it differently. I don't disagree with that. But she said something, and he discounted it. Yeah. How different it might have been if he said something like, you're right, Carol. You deserve more. I'm dead inside. I don't know how to give you what you need. If he had said something like that, would she have escalated?
She would have felt cared about.
Yeah, you just heard me. De-escalate. Sometimes when people get into fights, they might say one thing, and nobody hears the other person, right? When somebody goes up and you can come down, you can affirm what they're saying and validate it in a genuine way, not sarcastically. No, not sarcastic. Oh, you're right. I should have been more caring. How stupid am I? Okay, no, not that way, but in a genuine sort of way. Then their anger is no longer justified. They will come down. They will come down. He blew a chant. He eventually, they eventually kind of get on the same sheet of music there. And we have 15 chapters that we cover. At the end of the chapter, I think it's sort of poignant. She's so depressed because he keeps escalating, right? He's not hearing her. She's getting more and more depressed. Let's see if I can find the page. 197, let's see if I can find, if that's where I want to start, 197. I like what Carl said towards the bottom of the page, in the middle of a paragraph. The paragraph that says the couple were stopped short by my remarks. Later down he says, yeah, he said dispiritedly, it seems like such a waste that after all this time you're still fighting about who's to blame. As if you really believe it could be just one of you. Did you catch that? Hello? It's not just one of you. You're both participating in this dance that you're dancing right now. Anyway, so Carolyn keeps falling down. And at one point, Carl implies, why don't you just let yourself fall? Did you catch that in the reading? Just let yourself fall. And so she cries, and then eventually she's holding a pillow or something. He said, I wish you would hold yourself. She holds herself, she's crying, and then she's finally kind of coming out of it.
I thought it would have been so nice if David went up right after.
Yes, he missed an opportunity. But we miss a lot of opportunities in life, unfortunately. That's a reality thing. But I really like what Carl said to her after she kind of comes to, after all this energy is expended in crying and holding herself and realizing she didn't die in the process. She turns to everyone and said, what happened to me? Did you catch that in reading? And then Carl says, you fell down a flight of stairs and you caught yourself. That's pretty good. And in the end, that's what we want each member in a marital couple to do, is to catch themselves, to hold themselves up. Because when you can do that, you're not draining the other person of his or her resources. You're actually giving to the marriage. Does that make sense? Anyway, wonderful. Wonderful book. I love this book. All right. So with that, switching gears real quick. Just, yeah. And I'm not keeping you the whole time. I don't do that to you guys. Okay? All right. Intake interview. We do these things because we don't know what piece of information is important. Now, I'm not asking you guys to do an actual intake interview. You're creating, with your case study, whether it's fabricated or based on a real life person, you're creating the history that you know, and you're making up stuff that you don't know in an educated sort of way, right? So you're putting your best guess on it. For example, if you don't know if they had two brothers or sisters growing up, but you guess they probably had two older brothers and two younger sisters, you say that. Right? So you make up what you know. Don't go out and talk to them and interview them. You don't have my permission to do that. Right? you don't have permission to put them in any pain, you know, because that actually would be unethical to do that, right? All right. One of the things that you really want to do when you do an intake is identifying information. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but identifying information is important. Is it male? Is it female? How old are they? Are they married? Are they single? Are they divorced? That sort of thing. Ethnicity. Because you know, if you're a 16-year-old Caucasian male or female, you're probably dealing with other issues than a 44-year-old, you know, other ethnicity male, right? There, you know, these tiny pieces of information can tell you a lot, right? Who referred the person? That'll tell you how invested they are in therapy. If they were drug in by a family member, your work is cut out for you. If they came in on their own accord, the prognosis is better, right? So, you know, referral source, self or other.
So if it's self-referral, then would we make the referral question something the person said?
Yeah, so for your potential client that you're presenting on, you're guessing if they came in for treatment, how would it happen? If they were to come, would they come in on their own accord, or would they be forced into treatment by somebody else? And if they came in on their own accord, what would they want to work on? What would be your guess as to what they would put on the table to work on? If they were forced in by somebody else, what do you think would be on the table in terms of what they would work on?
So in the case of a self-referral, what would be the difference between in number 2, referral question needed, and presenting problem, or would it be the same thing? It could be different. I mean, you know, if they were brought in by a parent to deal with depression, then the referral question would be, can you help my daughter with her depression? Right.
What if she presents with anxiety-related issues instead of depressive-related issues? Or what if there's some psychoticism going on? You know, so the actual presenting problem may not be what's put on the table. And sometimes, to be honest, sometimes that doesn't happen at all. You know, people put decoys out there until they know that therapy is safe. Then you get to the real heart of why they came in.
So just to make sure I'm understanding you, this isn't my case, but for example, say someone is a self-referral and they say, I'm eating too much or whatever. That's
Could be
the
a
referral
it could
question.
be a decoy. Yeah.
But then when you're talking, then you find out they're depressed. Then
Yes,
that's the
that
presenting
becomes a
problem.
presenting problem.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And when you have presenting problem, you do want to define it as best as you can, because you probably need to start thinking in terms of the DSM, you know, how to define it in terms of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So instead of calling it, you know, they came in with depression, well, you can say that, but you can add on to why you think it's depression. They're having sleep onset insomnia, they're having problems with their appetite, they're losing weight, they're having problems with mood, they're mostly sad, blue, crying every day for 2 weeks. They've got at least 5 of the 9 symptoms that we talked about, remember? They've got at least 5 of those. And so you're actually trying to define that presenting problem. They may come in with more than one thing, but in this day and age, we're usually aiming for short-term intervention strategies. And so if they come in with like 10 or 20 things that they want to work on, one of the things I'm going to say is, you know, at best, we probably have 8 to 12 sessions. So out of all these things that you want to put on the table, in your mind, which one would be the most important thing to deal with first, and the second most, and the third most? And let's see how far we can go with this process. You know? So helping them narrow it down would be wonderful. History of presenting problem. So if they're having depression, you want to give a little history surrounding that. When did it first start? You know, under what conditions? You know, what do they believe provoked it into taking hold of their lives? You know, so. And then history, we get into a lot of different histories. We get into developmental history, we get into family of origin history, we get into legal history, drug, alcohol, abuse history, just abuse in terms of physical, emotional, psychological abuse, sexual abuse history, that sort of thing. Educational history, all these histories, they're all listed for you, so I don't need to belabor about that. You also want to know a little bit about the medical or psychiatric history, because number one, if they have a psychiatric history, you want to know what they did in therapy, and did it work? You know, if they've been in therapy 20 times and nothing's worked, whew, you got your hands full on this one, you know. If you know Gestalt didn't work, you're not going to go down the Gestalt road. So you know, questions typically you want to see is you know, oh, so you've been engaged in therapy before. What did you come out with from that process? What worked for you in that process, and what didn't? You know, so you're trying to pull teeth on some level. You want to see what worked and what didn't work. If you just ask them, how did that go? You might say, oh, awful, awful. But if you ask them, what went well and what didn't work out for you, now you got something concrete, right? Much more valuable information. Mental status, ooh, we ask a lot, or we look at things. You know, if you dress, you know, strangely, that's going to tell us something, right? You know, so let's say you got like purple, purple muumuu shirt on, I don't know, whatever, and a red tie, and I don't know, your gal that you get in a mini skirt that is, I don't know, green, red tie, purple shirt, green. I mean, you know, we're starting to get into the chaotic stuff going on here. If you're disheveled, you know, your hair's all messed up, you know, you look like you just woke up, you know, the hair's dirty, the clothes are wrinkled, you know, that tells you a different picture than someone who comes in dressed, you know, professional. There are differences there. So we look at dress and appearance, we look at attitude or responsiveness. So if I ask you questions, you know, and personal questions, because the clinical intake is going to get into a lot of different things that are going to be considered personal to you. But if you just give me a lot of guarded answers and you're evasive, that tells me something about you, right? If you're open and you allow yourself to be vulnerable, that tells me something about you too, right? If you don't even understand my questions, even though, you know, a 10-year-old could understand those questions, then that tells me something about you too. Right? So we look at attitude, responsiveness, speech, facial expressions. You know, so, you know, if they're having trouble finding words, they stutter, or their facial expressions are like this. No matter what you talk about, it's like this. Fortunately, I haven't seen you all look like that today. Every so often you smile at me. That's a good sign. But if you're, that's kind of flat. You know, it's kind of depressed type of thing. We have something we call, and I think I showed this before, O times 4. I did, didn't I? O times 4. Sometimes you have to put O times 3 or and what's missing, like they don't know why they're here. Situation is not understood. But this is orientation. That gives you a sense of something. It's like we said last time, if you don't even know your name, there are several hypotheses that could explain that. I mean, you're high in math, you're psychotic, right? Oh, yeah.
Can you explain that to me again? O times 4?
That's orientation.
Orientation means, are you oriented? Do you know where you are?
Yeah. On another page in your handout, if you go to under, let's see. Oh, yeah. It's that page that's orientation at the top. Orientation of person, place, time, and situation. And we talked briefly about it last week. So if you don't know who you are, I entertain several possibilities of that. You know, maybe you're high in that. Maybe you have amnesia. Maybe you're in a dementia of some form, or Alzheimer's. You know, if you don't know your name, that's a serious thing. You know. Chocolate piece and paper off it. Put it in that cap. Oh well. All right. So O times 4 is something you'll see in the report. We look at attention span, concentration, and memory. And sometimes we do that formally or informally. I mean, if I carry on a conversation with you, and you hang with me with the conversation, I'll probably say your attention is average, right? Your concentration is average, and your memory is average. Or I might want to do it formally. I might say, okay, I'm going to give you 3 things to remember. Okay. A pair of scissors, a pencil, and a pineapple. Okay. So those 3 things are? Oh, okay, so you immediately recall it's 3 out of 3. Now, 5 minutes later, I ask you again, do you remember those 3 things I gave you to remember? And you go, I think there was a piece of fruit in there somewhere. And that's all I gave you. And then 0 out of 3. And delayed recall is damaged. And is that because they're depressed or anxious? Or their memory processes are affected because of dementia, drugs, or something else? I don't know. But it's a piece of information that's helpful, right? So that's important. Mood. Mood is what they say. They say, when you ask them, how would you describe your mood today? That's basically how I would ask them. How would you describe your mood today? You say, what? Concerned. I'm feeling pretty good about life. Yeah. Or I'm feeling pretty depressed. Yeah. Mood is what they say. Affect is what you see. If they say I'm depressed, and every time you turn around, they're cracking a joke. Well, something's not lining up in this picture. Yeah. Because if you're truly, truly depressed, you're not going to be cracking jokes. Right? Or if they say I'm pretty happy, and the whole conversation is just depressing, something's not right. So we look at mood and affect. Mood is what they say, affect is what we see. We look at thought processes. Remember we talked about this before, circumstantiality? I ask you a question, and then you go off here, off here, off here, off here, off here, and 2 hours later you get back to answering my darn question. First of all, I don't have time for that. 2 hours for one client, you don't have time for that. But you try to get them back on track, and hopefully you get an answer. That would, if they go in a circle, circumstantial, think of circle. If they get back to an answer, that's circumstantial. If it's tangential, I ask you a question, bloop, you never come back to it, right? That's tangential, right? That's often nowhere in. Loose associations, yeah.
So if somebody is smiling,
If they're mad at
if I'm
you,
smiling,
and smiling,
during the session when I'm smiling, but within me I'm not happy, how will you know what is happening to me?
I'll probably get a sense of it. Even though you're smiling, if the tone of your conversation is about all the things that are going wrong in your life, I'm going to pay more attention to that than what I see in your face. Because people can try to hide things, And even a smile sometimes isn't very genuine, Sometimes it isn't, what it appears to be. So you pay attention to everything that they tell you in terms of body language and the verbal stuff. And then you make a clinical judgment as to what is accurate there. So I'm just going to skip all this other stuff because this is just eventually you'll get to it in psychopathology. I'm just going to fly to starting with that orientation page to these things. We talked about some of these before, like I said, circumstantiality, tangentiality, blocking. Remember blocking? Blocking is when, right? You block, right? And that's that's what blocking is about. You can't think of how to answer a question, right? Loose associations, the sentences may make sense, but they don't hang together in terms of continuity. John is a policeman, I like to read. You can stand some of these, you know. Well, what does that mean? They're sentences, and I do understand the sentences. It's better than word salad. Tenor, fire, ass time, not known color shirt. You know, stuff like that, you know. And people can get really word salady on you, especially if they have psychotic stuff going on. Perseveration. You stay on a theme. I asked you about what you thought about the football game the other day. And then you start answering about the football, and then I move on to another topic, and you're back to the football. I try to move someplace else, you're back to the football. You know, or you're back to the paranoia. You know, how that game was rigged. You know, you just stick with that like what is it? The tape, the grade tape, duct tape, like duct tape. You stick to it like duct tape. You won't let go of it. All right? That's perseveration. Neologisms is basically, you know, you're just, the word that you're using doesn't make any sense to anybody else, but it makes sense to you. You know, I need a skirt. Well, what's a skirt? Well, a skirt is something you get from McDonald's. Well, you mean McDonald's? Yeah, a skirt. You know, what you eat. You mean a hamburger? Oh yeah, that's what I mean, the skirt. Well, hello, I've never heard of skirt and hamburger put in the same sentence, but now I guess I know that's what that means to you. But that's a neologism. Then you have word approximations, which make a little more sense. And did you see my head shoe? Where'd my head shoe go? Where'd my head shoe go? What's on her head? A hat. That's my head shoe. That at least makes some sense. Where are my clinkers? Where are my clinkers? Where are my keys?
Your flipper flappers.
Oh, flipper flappers. Yeah, those are the mud, what do you call them? Mud
Flaps.
flaps, okay. I call them flipper flappers. When I was talking to my aunt about flipper flappers, she knew exactly what I was talking about. He's going like, I don't know what language they're talking, but that's not what they're called. Illusions is basically you misperceive something going on in your environment. I talked about this last time too, right? So you got like a shirt on a hanger on a door, and you think that's a person. I just misinterpreted what I saw, right? Unlike, well, it's somewhat like a delusion, but a delusion is just a false belief system. You know, I believe you're out to get me. That's a delusion for most people. There are some people who are out to get some people, right? So you have to tease that out. Is it really true or is it delusional? You know? When you start to hear story after story after story about other people out to get this one person, then it starts to lose its credibility, right? Hallucinations, on the other hand, are sensory experiences that other people aren't experiencing. So I hear things other people aren't hearing, or I see things other people aren't seeing. I asked one quiet gentleman in one of my classes, he hardly volunteered something, but so I asked him a question, give me an example of a hallucination. And it just stuck with me to this day. He said, the walls are crying. Whoa. That's not. The walls are crying. You can see the tears coming down the walls. That's not happening in here. Do you see the walls crying? I don't see the walls crying. Do you see my mother in the corner over there? No. That's a hallucination. Can you hear my dad's voice? He's talking to me right now. That would be a hallucination. Can you feel that alien standing behind you? I see him too. Ugly. Reminds me of someone I used to date. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Obsessions are thoughts that get stuck in there. You can have a thought of, I've got to constantly keep germs away from me. It just permeates in your brain. Now, the compulsion is the actual behavior of washing your hands. The obsession is, germs are bad, germs are bad, germs are bad. And if you've seen these shows where they magnify these little things that are on your skin to like the 100th level, and you're going, oh, you do know we have more non-human cells than human cells? We do. We have more non-human cells than human cells on our body and in our body. That's amazing when you think about it. But when they magnify these things and you see how ugly they are, some people will go, I'm washing my hands every 5 seconds, man. Or they just come by it naturally. They come out of the chute that way. And they're obsessive compulsive from the beginning.
Dora, so would it be correct to say when somebody's delusional, that can lead to them having a lot of illusions? Right?
Oftentimes you do see these things together. It's not usually just one thing.
And same thing with being obsessive and
oftentimes you see a whole package. When you start seeing some of these things together, one of the first thoughts that goes through my head until I can discount that is some sort of psychoticism. I'm starting to think that. Preoccupations, I just, I ruminate on things, things I need to get done today. And a certain amount of that is normal, but if that consumes your entire life, every waking moment, I hope you want to be free of that, and there are ways to get free of that. Phobias or irrational fears, paranoia, again, is that, people are out to get you. Ideas of reference, some people haven't heard of that one. Ideas of reference is like, Carrie's trying to tell me something by putting that water there. That's a message for me. I know what she's saying. She's saying, you learn that stuff to say. And you need a drink of water. So that TV show, somebody created that TV show to get a message to me. That radio or that record, that song, a message to me. Ideas of reference. So that gives you a little feel for mental statuses. We need those pieces of information because we don't know what's going to be valuable in terms of the intervention process and what isn't going to be valuable. And it's sort of like, I'll get to that later. And anyway, we just don't know. So we collect all the information. I have never had a client be unwilling to go through a standardized clinical intake. I have had only one client who, with a standardized clinical intake, refused to do the mental status exam. But you prep them by saying, I just never know when a piece of information is important. It might be useful for the intervention process. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Some of them may sound crazy. Please bear with me and forgive me for asking the questions. But I just don't know what's going to be important, what's not going to be important. So you can bear with that, can't you? Here's a trick, You can bear with that, can't you? It's hard to go, no. And you got this kind of little smile on your face and very accepting and that sort of thing. So I have never had a client turn me down. And in fact, almost in every case, I wouldn't say every case, but almost, people are very appreciative that you've taken the time to get to know them. Because I'll ask them questions they've never been asked before in their life, real personal stuff. And I've taken the time to do that. And they're going like, wow. It's so contrary to what they expect in the medical field. They ask you a couple questions, right? They figure it out. They give you medication or something, and you're out the door. Next client. Yeah. But I'm taking 50 minutes or so to do this intake with you, and people are just, they're taken back, and they're actually very appreciative. That majority of people. I've never had a person get mad at me, angry at me, or anything like that. But a lot has to deal with how you start that conversation off, and is there respect? Is there respect going both ways? And if there's disrespect coming from their end, you just ignore it, you just maintain a sense of respect for that person. So any questions with that?
Could you talk about treatment recommendations?
Oh, treatment recommendations, yes. When you have kind of the clinical impressions figured out for your case study, you kind of have a sense of what's wrong with this person. What you want to do is kind of look on the internet, because we have no textbooks, right? You look on the internet, look for best practices for that presenting problem. Look for best practices. That's what I would do, right? You'll find it, you know, and whether it's PTSD or major depressive disorder or some sort of anxiety disorder like panic disorder or something, you'll find it. And that you can word in your own way in terms of the recommendations. So, everybody's different. And even though they may come with the same presenting complaint, like somebody's coming in with obsessive compulsive disorder, for example, but because of their standardized clinical intake, you may actually have a different set of recommendations because they're different people. And you already have a sense that this intervention that might be best practice won't work with this person. You're going to make your best clinical judgment no matter what, if that makes sense. Next time we meet, we're doing our next 5 chapters, right? And eventually we will be done with this book. But I can tell you we're going to move on to a book equally as interesting, if not more interesting, because you're going to get through a case with every chapter. And they're individual cases, not family cases. So this is family, this is a whole book. The other one is chapters, individual cases. We're also going to get to the point where we're going to talk about techniques. So we're going to do some techniques in class. I'll present something to you and have you practice on each other. This ought to be interesting. There's some very unique techniques that you can use that maybe you've never thought about using that can actually be very helpful for the treatment process. So anyway, we'll talk about that more. Anybody who wants to stay by for the rest of the time and talk about their clinical impressions for their report thingy, I'm here.
Are you going to assign chapters for that Love's Executioner or not?
I will as well.
Okay.
Next week. Oh, and before you go, you know, we are, you know, these are the dates when we do our case studies, right? You know, so you're going to present your case, right? And I may abbreviate it. Just give me the essence of who you're presenting on. You still have your PowerPoint though, you know, so I know you did all the work, right? So, but I may abbreviate it. I'll get a feel for who your client is, and for about 5 minutes or so, I will be your monster client, and you will be the therapist, and you will try to fix me, okay? With whatever therapeutic orientation you favor in terms of picking out, right? And so we have these dates, you know, if we can help it, no more than 3 a day, you know, but if you can, you know, pick a day that you'd like to present your case and be that clinician. And believe you me, I'm not going to make this hard on you guys, okay? So don't think that you have to be an actor or, you know, or don't be embarrassed about getting up in front and doing this. This is we're going to have fun with this. We really will. If you get stuck, and many of you will probably get stuck, I'll trade places with you, and I'll show you what I would do in that situation. Does that make sense? Or maybe if anybody else has an idea, they might volunteer to come up and be the therapist, you know, and this will be a nice learning process.
And this is based on
Your
the
case
5-minute
study.
thing is based on the type of theory we decided to go with, right? That we chose
Right,
at the beginning.
exactly,
Okay.
right. So if you chose reality therapy, you're doing your best to try to use reality therapy. You know, you're not just, how you doing today? Ooh, I'm doing fine, okay. Well, then we're done, all right. You know, you're doing reality therapy, okay? What you know about reality therapy, you're trying to apply in this situation, okay? So, okay. Yeah. You know, and again, just look on the internet. You'll find a lot of good information on the internet. Reality therapy, or some of your old psych books, yeah.
Laura, what if when we signed up, there were some people whose theories overlap? I mean, there were a couple of us that wanted some things and things were full. I don't.
With a class
decided
this
that.
big, I don't think it much matters if there's a little replication. You know, when we have classes that are, years ago, when you have 5 or 6 people in a class, to have 2 people do reality theory, yeah. So if there's a little yeah, not a big deal, not a big deal, yeah.
Well, that's what, I'm not sure that the one that I chose applies to the one that I've fabricated now. So.
But see, that's the fun of it, though. Can we make it work? Can we somehow make it work? I'll show you a little clip next week that some of you have seen in a different class where a guy makes a clarinet out of a carrot. Can we make it work?
Oh, yeah.
That's the question. Can we make it work? Huh? So anyway, you guys, whoever wants to stay and get the clinical impressions clear in their head, I'm here for your consultation. Yes, please.